The Black Death, how the plague changed Europe forever. Picture this, a quiet village in the French countryside. The year is 1348. A mother wakes to find her child burning with fever. By midday, black swellings rise under his arms. By nightfall, he's dead. By dawn, so are two of her neighbors. By week's end, the village priest is gone. The church bells have fallen silent, and fear spreads faster than the plague itself. This was not just a disease. It was an apocalypse. A moment when medieval Europe broke and changed forever. This is the story of the Black Death, the most devastating pandemic in history, and how it reshaped everything from religion and science to warfare, society, and the power of kings. Intro. Between 1347 and 1351, the Black Death killed, by most estimates, 50 million people. That was 1/3 of Europe's population. Entire towns vanished. Fields went unplowed. Trade collapsed. Families abandoned their dead in the streets. The world stood still. But this is not just a story of death. It's a story of transformation. Because from the ashes of the plague came revolutions, social, economic, religious, that would change Europe forever. Let's step back to where it all began. The plague arrives. The roots of the Black Death trace back to the steppes of Central Asia. The disease likely lived among rodent populations for centuries before traveling along the Silk Road, the great trade network linking Asia and Europe. But, like all great disasters, it needed a moment to erupt. That moment came in 1346 at the Crimean trading port of Kaffa. The Mongols were besieging the city when their army fell sick from a mysterious, deadly illness. In a move that may have been the earliest recorded case of biological warfare, the Mongols are said to have catapulted plague-infected corpses over the city walls. Genoese merchants inside fled by ship, unknowingly carrying death with them. A year later, plague arrived in Messina, Sicily. Within weeks, it spread north to Italy, France, Spain, and then England. By 1348, it had reached the heart of Europe. What followed was not just a wave, it was a tsunami of suffering. What was the Black Death? The culprit was Yersinia pestis, a bacterium spread by fleas that lived on black rats. The plague took 3 terrifying forms. Bubonic plague caused the infamous black buboes, painful, swollen lymph nodes. Death came in days. Pneumonic plague attacked the lungs, spread by coughing, almost always fatal. Septicemic plague infected the bloodstream, killing victims within 24 hours, sometimes before symptoms even showed. And here's the terrifying part. No one in medieval Europe knew why it was killing them. Some blamed bad air. Others said earthquakes had poisoned the atmosphere. Many believed it was God's punishment for sin. Medieval doctors tried everything: bleeding patients, burning herbs, applying crushed emeralds, even strapping live chickens to the buboes. Nothing worked. Once the plague entered a town, it killed without mercy. Rich and poor, knight and peasant, priest and thief. Kings could not escape it. Neither could monks in their monasteries. Horror in the cities. Cities suffered worst. London, Florence, Paris, great capitals of medieval wealth and culture, became graveyards. Chroniclers wrote of corpses stacked in the streets. Sometimes there were not enough living people left to bury the dead. In Venice, cart drivers roamed the alleys crying, "Bring out your dead!" In Florence, children were found sucking at the breasts of dead mothers. In Avignon, the Pope consecrated the entire River Rhône so that bodies could simply be dumped in. Fear broke the chains of society. Parents abandoned children. Priests refused last rites. Servants fled wealthy households. Even family bonds dissolved. Some people turned to debauchery, drinking, and gambling, believing the world was ending. Others turned to extremism, joining a fanatical movement called the Flagellants, men who marched town to town, whipping themselves in public to beg God's forgiveness. Then came the scapegoats, blame, and persecution. When people are terrified and desperate, they look for someone to blame. In 1348, rumors spread that Jewish communities had poisoned wells to kill Christians. This lie ignited brutal violence. Across Europe, especially in Switzerland and Germany, Jewish villages were burned, massacred, or expelled. In Strasbourg alone, 2,000 Jews were murdered in a single day. This dark chapter reminds us, fear can be more dangerous than any disease. The collapse of the old world. The plague disrupted every part of medieval life, especially the economy. With so many people dead, farms were abandoned. Grain rotted in the fields. Food prices soared. Trade routes fell silent. The great feudal system, where peasants worked the land for their lords, began to crumble. Labor suddenly became scarce, and when workers are scarce, they become valuable. So peasants, the poorest people in medieval society, suddenly had leverage. Across Europe, they demanded higher wages and better conditions. Rulers tried to freeze wages by law, but it didn't work. Many peasants simply walked away, moving to new villages or towns in search of better pay. The old feudal order was dying. The plague didn't just kill people, it killed an entire system. Revolt and rebellion. Oppression breeds rebellion, and plague-era Europe saw plenty. In England, the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 erupted when workers refused to accept feudal control. Led by men like Wat Tyler, thousands marched on London. They demanded freedom from serfdom and oppressive taxes. Though the rebellion was eventually crushed, its impact was clear. The age of unquestioned noble power was ending. Similar uprisings struck Italy, France, and Flanders. Ordinary people were no longer content to bow to kings and lords. The rise of a new class. As feudalism weakened, a new middle class began to emerge. Merchants, craftsmen, skilled laborers. These people had money, not land, and money became the new source of power. Cities like Venice, Florence, Bruges, and London rose in influence. Trade networks reopened. Banking systems expanded. The idea of individual success, rather than birthright, started to take root. The seeds of the Renaissance were being planted in the ashes of the plague. Crisis of faith, but if society was changing, something much deeper was crumbling too. Belief. The medieval church had been the central force in people's lives. But during the plague, priests died by the thousands. Some fled their flock. Others were powerless to help. Prayers went unanswered. Fear turned to doubt. Many people began questioning the church's authority. New movements emerged, preaching personal faith over religious ritual. This shift would eventually lead to the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. In other words, the Black Death didn't just weaken feudalism, it weakened the church and opened the door for modern religious change. Science and medicine awaken. Before the plague, medieval medicine was shackled by superstition and ancient Greek theories. But after the plague, people began to ask, what if disease has natural causes? This question sparked a dramatic shift. Universities expanded medical studies. Scholars like Guy de Chauliac began recording clinical observations. In cities like Padua and Bologna, doctors performed human dissections, once forbidden by the church. And slowly, a new way of thinking emerged. Observation over superstition. You could argue, the Black Death helped begin the long road toward modern science. Culture of death. The plague haunted Europe for generations. It returned again and again, waves of infection in the 1360s, 1370s, and beyond. Entire generations grew up surrounded by death. Art changed. Hopeful religious paintings gave way to chilling images. The dance of death, skeletal reapers, decaying corpses, a reminder that death spared no one. Writers like Boccaccio and Chaucer filled their stories with plagues, fear, and dark humor. This was a people traumatized, but also hardened. They didn't forget. The world rebuilt. By 1400, Europe was a different place. Fewer people meant more land, more resources, more opportunity for survivors. Wages rose. Living standards improved for common people. Towns grew. Trade rebounded. The plague was destruction, but also transformation. It tore down the medieval world and made way for something new. The Renaissance in Italy. The rise of nation-states, the decline of feudalism, the rebirth of science and medicine, the early ideas of rebellion and reform. The Black Death didn't just change Europe, it ended the Middle Ages. Conclusion. In just 4 horrifying years, a microscopic bacterium reshaped human history. It shattered medieval society and forced Europe to adapt or die. And though the plague was one of humanity's darkest chapters, it may also have been the event that pushed the world toward modernity. Sometimes history moves not by slow evolution, but by violent transformation. If you found this journey through the Black Death eye-opening, subscribe to TorchLit History, where we uncover the moments that forged our world, one story at a time. Hit like to support the channel and comment below. Which part of the Black Death shocked you the most? And don't miss our next episode, where we travel from death to honor in Knights, Myth versus Reality. Because history isn't just about the past, it's a torch that lights the way forward.